My name is Joan Bailey. I live in the lovely little country village of Scopwick, which at the moment is full of daffodils, and we had a daffodil weekend on Sunday. And we had loads of visitors come to the village, so that gives you an idea of the place that I live in. It's very beautiful, but we have no shops. We have only a church, a chapel which is closed down, and a village hall and a pub. That's all we have in the village. And yet the community here is very, very caring. Everybody gradually gets to know one another. So I've been here for 38 years now. And my previous experience was that I was a vicar's wife from 1956 until my husband died 16 years ago. So you can gather from that I've had plenty of experience. Also, I taught for 28 years, so I was with reception and 7-year-olds, and for 18 months I was with 11-year-olds. And I'm now maturing. I'm at present 87, but will be 88 in about a month and a half.
So what do you remember about the place you grew up?
Oh, masses of things. I could give you the history of the town where I grew up. I remember all about the war. I was born in Sleaford, in my mother's back bedroom on Grantham Road. It was a very difficult birth, I understand, because I was a forceps delivery. So it was a home birth, and in those days the doctors used to come to your house. And just to give you a case in point, I had 2 brothers, and the second one had his tonsils out on the dining room table with the doctor and his brother, who was a surgeon. And at the end of that, they said to him, "Would you like to keep your tonsils?" And he turned his nose up at them. But that's the kind of background I've had. I've had very, very loving parents. They were both Christian, and I used to go to church on a regular basis. I was in the church choir from quite a youngster. At the age of 2, we went for a holiday to Scarborough, and they made me sing "Down Came the Raindrops, Word Perfect." So that's when I started singing, and I've been in choral societies and sung solos all over the place. So I'm still singing in church now, but my voice has dropped. I used to sing really high soprano at one stage. Now I can only get to D with a bit of effort. I went to college in London for 2 years. And the school didn't want me to go there. They said they'd never had anybody from their school. This was the Sleaford, Stephen and Sleaford Girls High School. And I wanted to teach, and I didn't want to go where they wanted me to go, which was somewhere in Yorkshire. I said, no, I'm going to apply for London. And going down in the train, there was another gentleman in the carriage who, funnily enough, was a clergyman. And he asked where we were going, and I said I was going for an interview. "Oh, you'll be fine," he said, and I did get in. And from then on, they sent students from the school to that college. I opened the gates, so to speak. It was a wonderful 2 years, though. Hadn't any money, but managed to survive on £2.50 a month. I learnt to manage from an early age. So my early days, I used to help do all sorts of little jobs in the kitchen for my mum. And she didn't have very much money. And I mean that. My father's job was very, very badly paid for what he did. And he was working for a seed merchant. He always had an open hand and greeted people with a lovely smile. And that's one of the things we put on his gravestone about him having a welcome hand and a smile. which was a wonderful man. And he was a great example because he was in the First World War and he was seriously wounded in the trenches, and he was 19 hours in the trenches before they could get him out. And he had a very, well, he nearly lost his leg, and he had a limp to begin with, but he persevered and persevered, and eventually he would walk like with a real military gait down the road. But he always had this lovely cane, which he carried underneath his arm, almost like a, I'm not quite how you would describe it, but somebody with a position. He would carry this cane, and I've still got it. He was a wonderful man, a big inspiration, and one of my earliest memories, and I shall never, ever, ever forget it. He had a lovely cycle which he used to go to work on, with a crossbar, of course, and on the crossbar he fitted this little seat. Now, I used to sit on this little seat between his legs as he was cycling along, and there was a bar just above the front wheel that I could put my feet on, and it meant that my legs went under the handlebars, okay? And he interested me in nature because he used to go for miles on cycle rides, and he would point out things to me, and he said it's the movement you see first of all rather than the animal itself. But if it moves, you spot it. And it's my love of nature that began then. And one day I got home from this cycle ride, and my mother said to me, "Where have you got those bruises from? Who's been hitting you at school?" Or whatever, because I was only small. And I said, "Nobody's been hitting me." And then she realised what it was, that I had grown so much. I'd been jamming my legs underneath the handlebars, and each time I went under, I was increasing the bruise. So she wouldn't let me go on the seat anymore, and I was heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. She'll never forget having to, and eventually, bless them, they saved up and got me a second-hand little bicycle that I could ride myself.
So you could go with him still?
Oh yes, we used to go cycling as a family. In fact, when I met my husband years before we were even engaged, there's so much I could tell you. We used to go out as a family and take a picnic and that kind of thing. Mother and brothers and everybody. No, my little brother was born 8 years after me, and I'm going back in time again now. In the wartime, I remember my father trying to make blackout for the upstairs landing window because we couldn't afford material. So he got some black paper and he made a big wooden frame, which he covered with the black paper, and he managed to fasten it with a piece of wood against the window. And we weren't allowed in the front bedroom because we couldn't get curtaining for the bay. So when it was dark, we had to keep that door shut. My mum and dad were the foundation. Wonderful parents, and I also had a very close family connected to my mum because she was the youngest of 9 and my dad was the youngest of 14, and I had loads of relations around, and my godmother lived in the town, and unfortunately, I could tell you a lot about her. She is one of those people that inspired me to keep going. She lived to 101 and a half. Wonderful lady. And when she was 100, I can hear her voice now. "Oh, Joan," she used to say. I organised this party for her, and we had 100 guests at it, all her relatives and friends. And she stood up and she gave a speech at that table without a note. And then almost at the end, she got up again and she said, "Oh, Joan, I've missed you out." We went for a holiday to Chapel Point and we had a bungalow. And, excuse me, on the penultimate day, who should turn up but my husband with his bike. I say my husband, with Hugh with his bike. Here's my window cleaner now. And he put up his one-man tent in the garden and stayed the night. Now, we thought this was wonderful because he came down to the beach with us, played with us. You know, we were still kids in those days. But what he was doing was a normal 3-speed bike, none of these mountain bikes or anything like that. He cycled to Venice and back over the Alps for his holiday. And another holiday he had was going through 9 countries in Europe. He made his own books. He kept diaries when he was on holiday. He took his own photographs and developed them in the cellar at Quarrington Vicarage.
My gosh. And he made these.
And he did all his own writing and all that sort of thing. I tell you, I told you he was a clever man, didn't I?
Indeed.
Look at that music. Just look how long it would have taken him to do that.
This is beautiful.
And in those days, it was all black and white photography, of course. But if you turn to the middle, there's a huge map. And he's marked where he went on his bike.
Oh my, this is amazing.
I tell you, you need me for about 6 weeks to get through all I can tell you.
Honestly, it is absolutely fine. These are beautiful.
So this man was really my rock. There's nothing else I can say about him. He influenced me, he helped me learning to read other books that I had never dared dabble in. When I was in the 6th form, they wanted to make everybody library members. And I hadn't read enough books with my disability. I was reading silly things like The Magic Faraway Tree and things like that, which were not considered suitable for library members. And I had to wade my way through books that I couldn't follow and fathom. But eventually they gave me a membership.
What do you think is different to when you were younger versus now?
Computers, we did start doing them at school at one time. We had one computer for the whole school. We had it for 6 weeks and then we passed it on to the next class. So by the time it came back to you, you'd forgotten everything you learnt. And I think that's why I don't like computers, because I've absorbed so much and I just don't want to battle with them. I have a phone and I can do texts and all that kind of thing, but anything with the internet, I'm out. I mean, so many things are new since I was born. When you think about the cars and how they've developed, and the airplanes, and going to the moon, and space travel, and there's just so much. And I think, in a way, childhood has been ruined, because when we were little, we used to have fairy stories and gentle books and things like that. And now youngsters are all glued to these weird games on the computer with, well, characters that don't really look like people. And they seem to always want to be killing people. I don't know why. I mean, we've experienced war, so we know what the real thing is, but when you think about how Ukraine is suffering at the moment through sheer madness, that to me is utterly wicked, because it's greed. It's people wanting things they haven't got, basically. And I think you have to learn to accept that there are certain things in life you will never attain. And sometimes if you do, it's disappointing because it doesn't bring all that you hoped it would bring. Right? And I think the simple things of life are still there, like going down to the beach and turning stones over and seeing tiny crabs and things like that, or going out into the country and spotting a deer, or the birds, the sound of birds. I'm missing the owls. We used to have owls that landed on the roof when I first came here, and now things are altering. They're going further and further away. Birds are disappearing, animals are dying, people are exploiting things for their own gain, and the natural world is being ruined by people build. Oh, we'll put. I know we've got to have solar panels. I think that I've got some on the roof and got into trouble for putting them on the roof at the time, but now everybody wants them, and it's that we've got modern technology. We ought to use it for the benefit of humanity, not for the destroying. We learnt that with the bombs at Hiroshima and that kind of thing, and that is still around. We've still got madmen who are quite capable of pushing a button and killing half the population of the world off. And nerve gases. What do they want nerve gases for? I mean, what would at the moment, that poor Ukraine, they seem to be just getting rid of history, getting rid of people because they're in the way. It's just like stepping on ants when we see ants in the garden. But ants have a purpose in life, even though we don't like them. And beauty. People, you see them going whizzing along in cars. They don't take any notice of where they're going or what's on the road. They run over things because they're going too fast. They have accidents killing other people. I met somebody the other day who said he's never known anything like Lincolnshire drivers. He said, or everywhere he's been in England, they seem to have respect. But here, folks overtake on bends, they overtake when they shouldn't do, they're travelling at 70 and 80 miles an hour when they should be doing much slower speeds. And I think the car has caused havoc, really, because not only that, it's polluting. I mean, what was wrong with the bike? I know it was slower, but at least it got you some places and it exercised you. I'm sorry, I've got. And another thing that really, really gets me more than anything else is litter. One of these days we'll come into the garden and find that the litter's over everything. Nobody seems to care. I used to teach the children, you must pick your things up. You don't just drop them. Then they'd go for a picnic with Mum and Dad, and Mum and Dad would leave them on the floor because they didn't know any better. Whereas the children, I hoped, would pick them up, but they don't. They follow the example of the parents. And I know that I don't wish to sound like But standards have dropped. Standards of caring, standards of helping others, standards of... There are young people that I have met who are sweet. There are exceptions to the rule. But there are an awful lot of teenagers who've no purpose in life, and the 20s as well. They haven't been able to get jobs, or they won't work, or... But everybody's got to do something for the benefit of everybody else. They mustn't... I don't know. I was taught that you've always got to remember your manners, open a door for ladies, you know, that type of thing. And I remember my daughter saying, we had a gentleman come and teach at the school, and he was an ex-RAF Air Commodore, and he was the musician. And music, he played the organ, fantastic classical music. And she said we couldn't get over it. He would stand at the door and hold the door for the girls. Well, nobody does that now, do they? They just barge. Just manners. Thank you. Please, may I have? I used to teach the kids. We used to have smarty parties for birthdays. And everybody in the class was allowed 2 Smarties, and the birthday person could have a few more. But they had to remember, please may I have, and they had to remember, thank you, and if they didn't, they had to put them back. That's what I think about standards anyway.